Thank you for joining us today to hear this life-changing message. We hope you and your family are blessed. If you enjoy, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also, please consider becoming a supporter of the channel to help us continue going. Blessings.
Church has turned her back on it, and it's sad to see those things develop. But what I'm getting at is there are problems in the marriage, and there's enough problems in marriage under the best circumstances without adding to them and making it worse. So I ask God to help you, and I think in the society in which we live and in the day in which we live, it would be far better not to have interracial marriage. Okay? Right.
You mentioned three major divisions.
Yes, right. Well, one would be the black races of the earth, the other would be the oriental races of the earth, and the third would be the white races of the earth. And I think they're all equally beautiful and lovely in the sight of God, and we should love them all just equally. There should be no difference in our thinking in that respect. Somebody says, well, if they're all equal, then what's the difference? The thing of it is, when you're saved, you don't cease being a woman or a man. It says in a man there's neither male nor female, neither bond nor free, neither Gentile nor Jew. Well, that may be true, but when you're saved, you're still a male or a female. You haven't changed any. In other words, in the sight of God, you're equal, but you are what you are, and you can't change that. And so thank God for being what you are, what God made you. You have a place in the program of God. And nobody should ever feel like that they're a second-rate citizen or something like that. They're not. They're precious in the sight of the Lord. All right, anything else? Yes, brother.
How important do you think it is that a man
Should handle the money? I think that a man that's smart, that realizes his wife can handle the money better than he can, should turn it over to her. That does not cause him to relinquish his headship. He has realized, he has been smart enough to realize that she is skilled along those lines and he's not. Now, if he knows how to handle money, well and good. That is, if he knows how to not be selfish with it and also to handle it, know how to handle it. But it is not an essential thing for every man to handle the money. It should be worked out between those two people. And the decision should be made in the light of the conditions existing and the skills of each one. Suppose the man is brilliant in a certain area, but when it comes to money, he's a spendthrift, doesn't know how to handle it. You see? On the other hand, it could be the other way around too. I don't believe there's any rule that you have to go by that says that the man has to handle the money or the woman has to handle it. It should be decided between those two, yes.
Do you feel that it is fun for the wife to work outside of the home before and after having children?
To work? I do not believe it's God's will for a woman to work on a permanent basis, nor even is it God's best plan. Now, frankly, many cannot make a go of it these days without that. That's just a fact of the case. I still don't believe it's the best plan, especially when children come. But you mentioned before children. The tragedy is many times that you get used to such a high scale of living, you can't come down. And therefore they postpone children and maybe not even have any children. And later on live to regret it, that they allowed this matter of high living to rob them of having the children that they should have. So you have to ask God to help you in that area, because children are a heritage of the Lord. And a normal family does have children and should have children. Right. All right, sister? Could you speak a little louder? Yes, should you consider the type of personality they are, whether they're sanguine or whether they're melancholy or whether they're phlegmatic and so forth. Yes, I think that's good. Dr. LaHaye brought that out in some of his books. He was pastor, by the way, in San Diego, and I knew him personally, and he's a Baptist man. He's a good man, and he put this out in some of his books, the temperament that an individual has. I don't think that's the overriding issue, but I think everything should be brought in consideration. Right, okay. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay. Everybody happy? Is that somebody asked it? I didn't hear it. Yes, all right, brother.
How long do you think that people should date before they enter marriage?
Somebody said that a long engagement is marriage insurance. A long engagement is marriage insurance. When I say a long engagement, I'm speaking of, say, 6 months. And the reason is this. Now, of course, always there needs to be the understanding that your relationship is on the right level and it's kept on the right level. If it isn't and it drops down to a physical level, it will more and more degenerate. And but we don't want that to happen. So keep it on a high level, and it takes time to go into everything that needs to be gone into in marriage. I urge and advise and almost insist that the engagement period be 6 months. That's the way I feel. I don't quarrel with anyone else that doesn't feel that way, but that's the way I feel. And the reason is because I have several times, even after folks have gone through everything I have for them, I've been conscious in my own spirit that something is not just right about this relationship. I've gone through everything I've got, and I commit them to God. And yet I know that, and before 6 months is out, they have broken up. And they found out that they're not for each other. I might tell you something. I have never personally stepped in to break up a marriage, except one time. Well, no, 2 times, but one time mainly, that as pastor. This was where it was obvious that this fella did not love this girl. They were both in our church, both with the Holy Ghost, both serving the Lord. She was our piano player. She was a beautiful person, but she had gotten to the late 20s and was afraid that she was going to be an old maid. This young man had his pick. He could pick and choose, and he sort of had that independent idea. Well, if you don't like me, I'll get somebody else. So if there was any calling to be done, he would never call her. She would have to call him. She was in the hospital. He didn't even show up in the hospital. Didn't even bring her flowers, not a card. She was in there 2 days, and he never showed his face. If there was any calling to be done, she had to do it. And so they got their engagements, they got their announcements out. They were been engaged for a period of time, 6 months or so. And they got their announcements out and printed up and ready to send out. And I was so burdened in the spirit over this thing. I got so burdened in the spirit over it. I finally called that girl in and I said, you cannot marry Chuck. There's no way you can marry him. She began to cry. She says, I'm afraid, Brother Gray, this is my last chance. And I just told her straight. I said, you're going to live a life of hell on earth with this man. He loves the Lord, but he loves himself more than he loves you. He loves his own pleasure more than he loves you. He really doesn't love you. It's obvious. And I recounted to her the things she already knew, but she was closing her eyes to them. So I said, I'm going to insist you do this. She said, well, we've already set the date. We've already got the announcements printed up. And we've already got the wedding plan. We've already got the bridesmaids. We've already got this and that and the other. I said, it makes no difference. Break it off. I said, if it's the last minute, break it off. If it's not going to be a good marriage, you can't let your pride stand in the way. She broke it off. Her father came to me and hugged me around the neck, says, you don't know how glad I am. About a year after that, a young man came into our church in the Navy. We had a lot of Navy fellas. So we had a lot of fellas to deal with, believe me. These Navy boys are, some of them are something. Believe it. Claim to be out of Christian homes, but act everything but. I don't say all of them are that way. Oh no, some of them are consecrated living for God. But this boy came to the Lord and really got an experience with God. And he immediately severed his relationship with the world, everything he was doing over there. He was all out for God. And about a year later, they got engaged. And I married them. And about a year after that, she got up and testified with tears in her eyes how thankful she was for her pastor that had stepped in. And then she urged the young girl, says, wait for God's time. I nearly ruined my life. This boy, the other boy, had already backslid, gone out. Married one of the other girls in the church, but left God and left the church. Was gone. So you see, somehow it pays to wait. Don't be in a hurry. That's one of the hard things for young people to do, to wait, to hold off until everything is proven. Prove all things. Hold fast that which is good. It pays to prove it out. Amen. Not just guess at it. The other occasion I had of breaking up a marriage was when a young lady in the church that one of our boys was engaged to started a prayer meeting. Now, she was apparently quite spiritual. She started a prayer meeting while I was gone, and when I came back, I discovered she was starting a prayer meeting and having gifts of the Spirit in operation and so forth, but no one was there supervising it, and things were being said in a critical way about the church. And so I stepped in and stopped the prayer meeting. Said that's not what a prayer meeting is for, and every prayer meeting should be under supervision, under proper supervision. I stopped the prayer meeting. She got very much offended. She rose up against me. And I said to this young man, who happens now to be one of our pastors, I said, you must break off your relationship with Barbara. And he went through a tormenting time over that thing. I said, it's going to be up to you. But if you stick with her, you're going to suffer for it, because she is very headstrong. She refuses to knuckle down. She refuses to be submissive. She's going to go her own way. And if she shows that attitude toward the church and the pastor, she'll show that attitude toward you. And if you have the call of God on you, you're headed for nothing but trouble. She was an artistic person, loved music, very talented, highly talented in many ways, desirable in many ways. He broke off with her. And another young lady came along and he married her. Beautiful person. And he's a pastor today of one of our fine churches in California. And he has never stopped thanking me. Believe me. This other girl, went off into false doctrine, into free Pentecost, some false doctrine out there somewhere. So it pays, friends, to take your time, not to leap into something. It pays to do that. It pays, whether you're a girl or a boy, it makes no difference. You should be very careful. This is the biggest decision you'll ever make apart from your own soul salvation. So you need to make sure of it. Any other questions? Yes, sister, in the blue.
I think that post-marital counseling should only be for a couple with problems, or would you recommend it even if they weren't having problems?
If they weren't having problems, I insist on every person that is planning to get engaged, I will not allow them to get engaged before they go through this counseling. And when they go through it successfully, I announce their engagement. And then they get to sit together, but not before. So one of them gets up and Mark walks over to the other one while everybody claps. Oh, yes. All right. Oh, we have a lot of fun. Revival Tabernacle. Okay, yes.
A lot of people say you should date anybody that you wouldn't think about marrying. How do you feel about that?
What was that again? Just everybody what?
People say that you shouldn't date someone unless you would consider marrying them.
You shouldn't date anyone until you consider marrying them. Unless you consider marrying them? Unless you would consider marrying them. Well, there may be some truth to that. You don't want to date someone, for instance, who would be out of bounds for you to marry. A sinner, for instance, or someone that's too young. I would say there's a lot of merit to that, but you don't need to feel that it's necessarily that the other person or you, neither of you should feel this is necessarily any thing serious between you at all because you happen to date. Just let it unfold. Let it come gradually. Let it come naturally. Don't force anything. If it isn't on both sides, it's no good. It has to be both sides. It can't be just one-sided. And if it's of God, it'll ripen. It'll develop. You don't force it like a rose. You try to make a bud into a rose and pull those petals out. You ruin it. You have to just take it as it comes. And if it's of God, the Lord will bring it about. It'll be beautiful to see. That's right. But I would think that normally speaking, unless you just are thinking in terms of just friendship, that you shouldn't, because sometimes you give wrong ideas to other people. And at the same time, you're apt to think, well, I can, if your friendship begins to ripen, if they're not for each other, the temptation will be, in other words, if they're not legitimate candidates for you to marry, the temptation will be for you to overstep. So it might be better to keep that as a rule. It might be good, yes.
When a couple is thinking marriage, say one of the two have just come to the truth within the past year or so, what do you think about bringing things out of the past and over? Do they need to discuss their past?
The things they've done in the past.
Before they come to the truth?
Well, now there's a difference of opinion on that, and really, it's important that you do understand that individual. Even after a person's saved, they do not lose their personality. They're the same person, even though they're born again, and new person in the sense that they're born again. But if they have for instance, if they have artistic ability, they still have artistic ability. If they have a certain bent in a certain direction, their tendency is to still go that way. And it's good if you understand. You don't have to know all the details, but it's good if you understand what problems they've had in time past. I urge people not to get people just coming into the church, not to try to pair off and before a year. If a person can get established in God for 1 year before there's any courtship, I think they're far better off. And everybody else is too. There are certain people that like to latch on to any new people that comes in. And generally that relationship doesn't last long, and it wears out, and then they latch on to somebody else. And that person is immature. So they need to learn how to back off and allow this person to develop for at least a year in God before the thought of any kind of serious relationship comes into play here. I think that's a very safe thing. And I don't think all the details need to be said. For instance, if a person has a tendency toward some abnormality in his life, I think that should be known. But I don't think all the details of what he did necessarily need to be said. You understand what I'm saying? You should know if he's had another wife. That's for sure. It doesn't hurt to know if he's had a prison record and why. You'd want to know that, wouldn't you? All right. So there's some things that you need to know, but you don't need to know all the details of it. Every episode. All right. I think our time is up. Brother Enzi?